The president was interviewed yesterday, and there are very many things that the president said. You all heard what he said, and there are very many things that you can learn from that interview. If I may ask you, what is the most important thing that you learned yesterday from that interview? I know there are very many things that you learned, but just pick the most important thing that you learned from that interview yesterday. I, for one, I learned very many things yesterday. And today I'm going to talk about one of the things that I learned yesterday during that interview. What I heard the president saying is that from last year's revenue collection, the total collected was 2.8 trillion Kenya shillings. That is a lot of money. And out of that, approximately 1 trillion was used for salaries. And that would give us that 5.7%. 1.3 trillion was used to pay our domestic and foreign debts. And that gives us approximately 46.4%. The rest, which is approximately 0.5 trillion Kenya shillings, was used for everything else, and that is 17.85%. Development, money to the counties, any donations came from that 17.85%. That is very worrying. It is. Because almost 50% of our revenues are being used to pay debts. I want to explain this scenario from a personal perspective so that people can understand exactly what the president was saying. Let's just assume that you have a salary of 10,000. 10,000. If from the 10,000 you pay 35.7 as salaries to your workers, that would mean that out of the 10,000, 3,570 would go to your workers as salaries. And assuming you also have debts, you would pay 46.4 as debt repayments, which is 4,640 shillings. What you'd remain with is 5%. 5% of 10,000 is 500 shillings. And that 500 shillings is what you would need to pay the rent, pay electricity, feed your children, donate to any cause that you have been donating. Maybe there's a plot you are buying, maybe there's some development that you're doing, you'd be left with only 500 shillings. You see how difficult the situation is. This is what majority of us are not getting. That as a country, we risk defaulting on our domestic and international debts. When you default, what does it mean? It means that you're not paying your debts, either because you don't have the money to pay, or you have decided you are not going to pay. In our case as a country, if it comes to that, we will not be paying our debts because we do not have the money to pay the debts. What happens when you don't pay someone's debt. It is not different from a personal debt. Imagine the time that you had a debt from the kiosk person. You don't have the money, and the kiosk person is expecting you to pay the money. Majority of us, what we have done is we have made sure that we do not pass by that kiosk. And today, because they are mobile phones, we even go to the extent of blocking the number of the person that we owe. It is a very embarrassing situation. But for a country, it has a lot of repercussions. If you're not able to pay your debts, who is going to respect you? If you're not going to pay your debts, who is going to lend you tomorrow? If you're not going to pay your debts, who is coming to invest in this country? There are very many bad things that happen when a country is not able to pay its debts, including political instability. Because inability to pay a debt is an indication of very many things that are not going well in that country. Now, we all agree that in this country, we actually do not have a very big problem when it comes to revenue generation. Our problem is expenditure. If you compare East African community countries and Kenya, we are actually doing well as far as revenue generation is concerned. But there is no money that is enough if it is not being used properly. Looking at what the president said, what can we do about it? Our two key revenue consumers are salaries and debt repayments. And the president said the debt repayments is interest. Not even the principal amount, it is interest. I'm quoting the president's words. So what is it that we can do? Let us look at the salaries. One of the questions that we need to ask ourselves as a country: does everybody who is in the payroll report to work? That is one of the questions we need to ask ourselves, because we have heard many times that there are ghost workers. And this means that there are some people, they do not work, but they receive salaries. What we need is an audit. And an audit is not enough. Somebody must be answerable, because if you have people in the payroll and they do not report to work, who is supposed to answer for that? The person who is directly in charge, and they should actually be surcharged for that money. I have worked in government, and everybody is responsible for someone. You're working in a department, there is a departmental head, and everybody reports to someone. You're working in a department, and there is a departmental head. So somebody knows exactly what is happening, but they choose to keep quiet because most likely they are part and parcel of the scheme. That is number one. Number two, are those people productive? What is it that they bring on the table? What is it? Because you must match your expenditure with generation of revenue and also productivity. What is it that they do? For example, in a ministry, how many PSs do we have in a ministry? Can that job be done by one person? Today, we are talking about automation. We are talking about AI. We are talking about using technology in all other areas of management and productivity. Can some of those jobs that are being done by people manually, can they be automated? Of course they can be automated. They can. Years gone by, every boss needed a secretary. And today, is it the case? It is not. That is number 2. Number 3, we've heard about nepotism. And this is a big problem. And this is a big problem. And this problem has not only started with this government. We all know that this country faces a huge problem as far as nepotism is concerned. That is where you employ your relatives, and the only qualification that those people need is to know somebody who is in government or somewhere. People who are unproductive, but they are working for the government because they know people. I think it's the high time the government put in its foot down. If I'm working in an organization, my husband should not be working in that organization. My son shouldn't be working in that organization. My son's wife or my daughter's husband shouldn't be working in that organization. Because if we continue like that, you will find that a grandparent, their parents, and even their grandchildren are working in that organization. We need a law that prohibits that, because it's not only some families that can produce people to work in certain organizations. So it is given, we need to relook at our salary expenditure. We need to do that, because what is coming out is that 36% of all the taxes that Kenyans pay are to keep people in offices. And some of those people are totally unproductive. Let us look at the question of debt. We know that some of those debts are very old, and this country has continued to pay those debts. The question is, when are we going to complete paying some of those debts? Some of the people who have given us money, international organizations and international governments, they behave like Shylocks. You continuously pay the interest, and the principal amount does not come down. When are we ever going to complete paying those debts? We need to ask ourselves that question, because we cannot continue like this. This is modern day slavery. It is.